I have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato, and you're spending a few moments in Underground USA. As we head into one of the most contentious elections since the debacle of the recount in 2000, Virginia is entangled in a heated legal battle over its efforts to cleanse approximately 1,600 non-citizens from its voter rolls, an action that highlights the federal government's overreach into state sovereignty. The state has rightly escalated this matter to the U.S. Supreme Court after a federal judge, appointed by the Biden-Harris administration, blocked the removal of these registrations. This judicial intervention was spurred by lawsuits from the Biden-Harris Department of Justice alongside advocacy groups like the League of Women Voters, which has become decidedly partisan to the radical left in recent years, and the Virginia Coalition for Immigrant Rights. All are arguing that federal regulations prevent Virginia's changes to voter rolls within 90 days of an election, as dictated by the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. Governor Glenn Youngkin's administration, attempting to uphold the integrity of Virginia's electoral process in the face of the Biden-Harris administration's massive importation of illegal immigrants, issued an executive order for daily voter registration data updates from the Department of Motor Vehicles to identify those who did not affirm U.S. citizenship during license applications. Virginia's Attorney General has criticized this federal interference, asserting that failure to remove these individuals not only undermines state autonomy, but also sows confusion among voters, strains election resources, and suggests to non-citizens that illegal voting is permissible, thus diluting the votes of and disenfranchising legitimate voters. This scenario underscores a significant conflict between Virginia's state rights under the 9th and 10th Amendments and what many see as overbearing and unconstitutional federal election interference. It raises questions of whether current federal laws are unconstitutionally overly restrictive and detrimental to maintaining electoral integrity at the state level. I cite the 9th and 10th Amendments as they mandate the following, respectively.
The enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people.
And
the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people.
So according to the text of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, it's the purview of the state to, among other provisions, establish federal election voter registration procedures and to protect the integrity of the electoral process by assuring an accurate and current voter registration roll for elections for federal office. Now, aside from the fact that Youngkin's executive order upholds the direction of the legislation, one overarching point, and it's a big one, comes into play. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993 unconstitutionally usurps the authority of the state of Virginia and all other states to conduct its state elections by effectively nullifying the 9th and 10th Amendments. The Constitution does not explicitly grant the federal government broad, direct authority over state or local elections. Therefore, the prescription mandated under the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 violates both amendments. Over time, and specifically since the Wilson administration and the pus-like eruption of neo-Marxist progressivism in the United States, abusing opportunistic interpretations of the Commerce Clause, the Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment, and other regulatory provisions, Congress has enacted laws that unconstitutionally influence or regulate aspects of state election processes under the disingenuous guise of ensuring the right to vote free from racial discrimination. The far left has been playing this deceitful game ever since they realized they could bastardize and abuse the civil rights movement to their opportunistic benefit. This is a perfect opportunity for Virginia's state government to band together to invoke nullification to assure the state's free and fair elections. Since the federal government, through its arrogance and greed for centralized power, is blatantly seeking to co-opt completely the authority over Virginia's elections, the state of Virginia's use of nullification in refusing to recognize the authority of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 over their voter rolls is an appropriate use of that action. Make no mistake, the far left and Obama 2.0 are not going to go quietly into the night should Harris-Walz be defeated on November 5th. They'll use lawfare at every turn to attempt to steal the will of the people for their own transformative purposes, for their lust for power, their greed for control. As was said in Madison Square Garden, it is time to dream big again, and in order to do that, we need leaders brave enough to think outside the box to cut off the balls of an aggressive, constitution-usurping neo-Marxist left through all legal means possible. As I wrote in my book, Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government, the utilization of nullification by the states against an aggressive, totalitarian, wannabe federal government is an indispensable tool in protecting the Constitution and the Bill of Rights without resorting to a bloody second U.S. Civil War. If your state is experiencing pushback from the federal government for wanting to maintain its voter rolls accurately, this is one of those times to engage with your state governments. Grab a copy of this book and send it to a receptive member of your state legislature or governor, urging them to protect your state's sovereignty through the use of nullification, and do it today. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station, WGUL AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
The federal government is becoming more centralized by the day. Opportunistic politicians are centralizing power in Washington, D.C., and incrementally whittling away at our rights. Should the worst-case scenario play out and Kamala Harris and Obama 3.0 assume power on November 5th, we must be prepared with a plan to rein in the Marxism they will unleash through the federal government. Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government by Frank Salato, lays out a plan in which the state governments can claw back their sovereignty from the overreach of the federal government, saving us from a second bloody civil war. Arm yourself with the knowledge of this nation-saving option. Get your copy of Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government, available on Amazon.com in Kindle form and paperback.
Bank of America wants to control how you live your life. They're building a system to track your carbon emissions and monitor your driving, coming after your Second Amendment rights, favoring certain home buyers based on their race. Bank of America is using a social score system straight out of China's playbook. Bank of America is obsessed with trying to control your life. What will they do next? Bank of America. Their lies start with their name.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Well, so many things happening, obviously, around the world and so forth, and around the country. But this rally in New York City was really something. It was almost beyond a rally. It was more like a convention all over again, it seemed like.
Well, if anything, it was a statement.
Yep.
And I think that's what Governor Hochul of New York failed to see. When you can sell out Madison Square Garden and have an almost equal size of people outside that couldn't get in, and that's per the New York City Police Department.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a statement in a place where it's supposed to be the epicenter of everything anti-Trump. To be able to do that, where people would come into a city that has been in the headlines for being so incredibly violent lately, for being lawless, where the police department is overwhelmed and doesn't have the support of the elected officials, where it's unsafe to be a New Yorker. To have people flock there in those numbers, waiting for almost 24 hours before the doors open to get in. That's a statement. And it's not only a statement by Donald Trump and the Trump campaign, it's a statement by the people who showed up to do that. They're tired of it. And, you know, regardless of what Kathy Hochul said, white flag of surrender, maybe it was for Kamala Harris.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it amazes me, you know, how much they will try to just, you know, deceive you and, you know, to say, okay, this wasn't what you thought it was. And meanwhile, Kamala Harris is still fighting in these swing states. Don't you think, you know, Frank, that she would be sailing along pretty nicely at this point? But she's not. And I think that tells us a lot.
Yeah, these are not the droids you're looking for. You know, that's pretty much what the Democrat playbook is right now. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, and these are not the droids you're looking for. Because everything that they're laying their hat on, and especially in the media, is just provably false. I mean, it's blatantly, provably false. And everybody who's got an IQ over that of a walnut understands that. So they're just running their brand into the ground. They've done that to a great extent just by declaring that Joe Biden was sharp as a tack for as long as they did. They damaged their brand further by installing Kamala Harris without any semblance of asking the people of their party if that's who they wanted. And now this just 24/7, 365 lying about what people are seeing. I got a text message this morning before we came on the air from somebody who lives in Belgium, a good friend of mine, who said, "Oh, so Donald Trump's a fascist now? Really? We didn't know that. We never heard that. He's not a fascist. Why are you guys calling him a fascist?" You know, so the people of the world are seeing through this very veneer curtain of deceit. And they're kind of scratching their heads wondering which way we're going to go on November 5th because they're a little worried.
Mm-hmm. Well, I could see why, you know, because obviously, you know, going the Kamala Harris way is going to exacerbate the dumpster fires that are happening already. But there was a sort of a message at that rally too, Frank, the idea that, you know, Kamala broke it, Trump can fix it. And then Trump also talked about, you know, we're not dreaming big anymore. Now, he's not talking about these, quote, hopes and aspirations that Kamala Harris is using, but he's actually talking about doing big things with our country and getting big solutions happening.
Well, and he planted the seed a few days before talking about replacing the income tax.
Yeah.
That's something good people have been trying to start a conversation about for as long as I've been doing what I do. The people who have been trying to explain a fair tax, a consumption tax, a flat tax, just beating our heads against the wall for almost 30 years. Now it's into a national conversation. That's a pretty big thing.
Yeah.
And the fact is that by doing it, now the conversation is here where people are going, really? The country would glean more revenue by moving to a different tax system? and allowing us to keep all our money? Why haven't we done this before? Well, it's because the elected class is playing the game on you and ripping you off, and they've been doing it since the passage of the 16th Amendment.
You know, Frank, it was interesting. You had all these different speakers, of course, at the rally at Madison Square Garden. One of them was Tucker Carlson. One of the things that he said I thought was pretty cool was he said, you know, people like Trump because he likes them. And it was a very good way of encapsulating the idea that Trump likes to talk to people, help people. This has always been Donald Trump ever before he ever ran for president. All these stories of how he'd help people or assist them or do something good for them. But he likes the people. And the Democrat Party elite kind of loathe the people to a great degree. You know, it's kind of like, you know, they just don't. And Kamala Harris doesn't get out and really mix it up at all.
No, I'm not sure they loathe them, but they do have a high level of contempt for them because they are the unwashed masses. They need them because otherwise you have no one to rule over.
Right.
You know, that's how they see this. They know best how to run everything, and nobody else's opinion matters. So, yeah, we'll give you the illusion of free speech and that you matter by allowing you to cast a piece of paper every 2 and 4 years. But really, once we get into Washington, we know how to do it. So you just don't worry about it. You're not smart enough to be able to engage in your own government. We'll do that for you. Just do what you're told.
Yeah, it's the experts you mentioned before. Going back many decades, it's bringing all the experts, and the experts will lead us, that kind of thing.
Well, that was Woodrow Wilson. The progressive movement ushered in the age of the expert in government. There's nothing wrong with someone who knows a subject matter and getting their opinion on it and trying to understand, okay, I'm not an expert on astrophysics. So I'm going to talk to somebody who is an astrophysicist if I need a question answered about astrophysics. But these experts have never left, and they get asked questions about everything. So an astrophysicist is all of a sudden talking to the president about taxes and the economy or foreign policy.
Mm-hmm.
He's an expert. He knows what he's talking about. Not necessarily. And today, when you're looking at academia, there's not a lot of experts in academia unless you're talking about the sciences, or even the law has become corrupted in academia because it's been polluted by opinion and ideology.
Mm-hmm.
So the expert class, I'd rather sit down and talk about what we should do around the world with a plumber or a roofer or an electrician, because these people have an understanding of common sense. They make their way in the world every day using common sense. And that's why, and this is just my opinion, but it seems to have a lot of validity to it. That's why Donald Trump resonates with the people, because he has to work with all of the people who do exactly what I just said. He builds buildings for a living. And that means he's talking to workers and engineers and union people and laborers,
mm-hmm.
cement people, electricians, carpenters.
Exactly.
These are real people. So he is grounded in, he may be a billionaire. You can't say that he understands your troubles going to the store and buying a gallon of milk. But he will empathize with you genuinely because he likes the people who have made him what he is today.
Indeed. And these very same people all have to problem solve. Whatever you're talking about, these different trades, electrician, plumber, so forth. There's never a job that just goes easy. They have to adapt, and they have to figure out how are they going to make this really work. It's never all just textbook. And that's what the American people expect. They expect their leaders to be able to fashion real solutions and not just come out with more platitudes like Kamala Harris keeps doing. If you were to ask her about solving any problem, she would just probably say, well, when we look at solutions, we have to have a solution. Yeah.
She was born in a Midwest or middle class
That's right.
family in a middle class neighborhood with a lawn. I might add, had a lawn.
And people were proud of their lawn.
Yeah. The other thing that these problem solvers actually can't do, it's one of their limitations, is they can't just decide to give themselves money to throw at their problems.
Yep.
They have to work within budgets. Otherwise, they don't get hired again. If you're a carpenter and all of a sudden you just keep showing up year after year on a job that should have been finished in about 4 months, saying, I'm going to need some more money to get this done. I was talking to a buddy of mine, consulting with him, and we just feel that we have to talk more about the project to make sure that it can get done. You're going to get fired.
Yeah. I think the Democrats call that kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, and the Republicans are just as guilty of it. People who are ensconced inside the Beltway into the deep state, into the status quo establishment apparatus, they're all guilty of this. Talk. We don't do anything. We need another study. Let's commission this group to do a study for $50 million. It's $25 million here, $10 million here, $50 million here. It all adds up. It all adds up. We didn't send you to Washington to ask for a study incessantly. We sent you to vote on things. Now, does the federal government have to vote on a lot of things? Yes, it's because they expanded their purview well beyond what the Constitution says. And if you listen to what Donald Trump wants to do, what RFK wants to do, what Tulsi Gabbard says that we should do, what Elon Musk wants to do, it's to downsize the federal government so that we remove a bulk of the power from the centralized federal government in Washington, D.C., which they have no right to, and give it back to the states where it belongs. Mm-hmm. The government closest to you is the government that's easiest to change because it doesn't take as many votes. When Democrats have to play on a 50-state playing field, they have to spend 50 times the money.
Right.
So it becomes more difficult. You break that down into counties, it gets even worse. The money's not there, so all of a sudden they have to talk about policy when it gets granular like that. And that's the way it should be. It's the way it was meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
Not this Kamala Harris. Well, I'll do this for you. And by the way, I'm going to give you $25,000. Anybody look into that? Into the minutia of it? It's only a first-generation person who can actually get that $25,000. If your parents own their house, you get nothing. You're not even eligible for the program.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people would say, where's my $25,000?
Well, you don't get it. The people we let in on the southern border get it. That's the point.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, too, Frank, they have been lauding, and even in some of these recent interviews, Joe Biden is, capable. He's has all this judgment. He's got the experience, but for some reason, he's not the nominee, of course, as we all know. But evidently, looks like the Kamala Harris campaign is trying to really distance themselves in this last week from Joe Biden. Why wouldn't they want to say we're building on Biden's success?
It's a hell of a question. If what she says is true, that she's been in the room when he's made the hard decisions. He's sharp as a tack. The man's mind is like a steel trap that no one can come close to. If that's the case, one, why is she the nominee? And two, why would she want to distance herself from him?
Yeah, precisely. I mean, this is why this whole campaign is just so crazy from the get-go.
Well, everybody must remember, and it's time to be honest and upfront about this and declare that you understand it. Joe Biden hasn't been running the government, neither is Kamala Harris. Obama 2.0, the same appointees that were in the Obama administration are still in their positions today in the Biden administration, and they will remain in the Harris administration. And that's who's been running our country into the ground, a group of neo-Marxists who hate America.
Actor Ellen Barkin has put out a tweet about Trump's Madison Square Garden rally, and basically saying boycott Madison Square Garden. She says that on the anniversary of the Tree of Life synagogue murders, Trump is holding a Nazi rally in New York City at Madison Square Garden. Yes, a Nazi rally, but this time it won't just be the Jews, it will be us. Okay, all right. See, it's kind of unhinged, if you ask me. The TDS is really getting really bad. So what do you think about that is some pretty strong TDS, if you ask me.
Of course, you're talking about Ellen Barkin's statement, and it's got the worth of a half-eaten Tootsie Pop drop. Hollywood, if you don't say something that's inflammatory and you use the word Nazi or Hitler when talking about Donald Trump, you don't work. So when you see people like Ellen Barkin, and she's had a few good movies, don't get me wrong. She did one with Dennis Quaid back in the 80s that was pretty damn good, based out of New Orleans.
Yeah,
The Big Easy. But other than that, she's not an A-lister. So what the hell do I care what she has to say?
Yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, I guess some people are they just taking this hook, line, and sinker that because there was a Nazi rally in 1939 in Madison Square Garden, ergo Trump's rally is in fact a Nazi rally. The education system is failing us, Frank. You can't put those two things together.
I often criticize the far left for not thinking things through. As a matter of fact, it tends to be an epidemic in our society today. People make these knee-jerk decisions and they shoot their mouth off before they think things through. Does anybody on the left, even the far left, think that calling half the electorate in the United States Nazis is going to make them think about voting for your candidate? So Ellen Barkin and De Niro and Robbins and the rest of these people come out and they say, these Nazis, Donald Trump and his brown shirts. He's talking about you. They're talking about you.
Yeah.
So where is the persuasive argument about, it would be better for you to vote for Kamala Harris? Even thinking it through on the most simplistic level, because Donald Trump is a Nazi. But they don't do that. It's the Nazis at Madison Square Garden. Okay, that means everybody who voted for Trump last time around, you've just called a Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
So why would I want to support your candidate?
Right. And it's quite an insult too, Frank, to all the people who were literally persecuted by the Nazis, affected by the Nazis in some way. It belittles that so much. I can't imagine how damaging that must be to a lot of people.
Add to that the fact that there isn't really a family in the United States, unless you've come here since the end of World War II, who wasn't directly affected by somebody having to fight the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
We lost scores of Americans fighting World War II in the European theater. It was something the entire country galvanized around to make sure that, except for the New York Times, and make no mistake about that, that's not an exaggeration, they ignored the Holocaust and they wrote glowing things about Hitler and his fascism. So that's why if you're listening to the New York Times today, you are a blithering idiot because you don't understand history. But so you call people Nazis who voted for this person when in fact I know my family was touched by World War II in the European theater. I don't take kindly to being called a Nazi. So what's the goal here when you decide to trot out the Hitler Nazi rhetoric? Because all you're doing is offending and galvanizing people who weren't thinking about your candidate in the first place. It's really crappy politics.
Yeah.
But this is who's leading the Democrat Party? These are the people who are the brain trust of the Democrat Party. This is their strategy? Well, to cement the alienation of half the electorate? That's just stupidity on steroids.
Oh, yeah, big time. And this is why even RFK Jr., who also appeared in Madison Square Garden, said, again, and I think so many people feel like this who have been lifelong Democrats. The Democrat Party left them. They don't have their values anymore. The Democrat Party is something else entirely these days.
And that's been happening since the days of Ronald Reagan before he was governor. That was his line in his speech. And it echoes today. When you could get someone like a Kennedy to say, you know what? This party it's not what we signed up for. It's not what my family gave 2 lives to actually try to advance. It's wrong. A great speech yesterday was by Dr. Phil, of all people. It was excellent because he started hitting on the fact that, this rhetoric coming out of the left, it's not reflective of who we are. It's not reflective of what an American is. What's reflective of what an American is who we were on 9/12/2001. Mm-hmm. Everybody came together. Not 9/11. We all got wounded on 9/11. On 9/12, everybody picked up. Everybody helped their neighbors. We cared about each other. And we realized we have more in common than we have in difference, and that the world sees us not as this balkanized electorate like the Democrats do, because they need their identity politics to cobble together 51% to win elections. They divide you to put the pieces back together to make the world they want to see. Mm-hmm. But when we realize we've got more in common than we have in difference, that power by the divisive forces of the progressive left, it just melts. It melts. My neighbor's not a Nazi. My neighbor's not a Nazi. My neighbor wants to pay her bills just like I do. Wants to leave a better place for their kids just like I do. Wants to be safe just like I do. Wants to be able to have a pleasant life just like I do. If she's got a Kamala Harris sign in her yard, I may have a discussion with her about why are you doing that? Answer me some quizzle me this, Batman. I'll take some time to have a discussion, but I don't walk over there and go, "Hey, Nazi, your sign's too close to my driveway, you Nazi." It doesn't work.
But that's what the Democrat Party elite want. They need that division to sell their message or to frighten people. Or again, it's all about power. It's never about ever coming together the way you're describing.
When we look at the policies that have been advanced through the Obama administration and through the Biden administration, there hasn't been one that has been beneficial to the average American person. You could talk about Obamacare all you want, but nobody wants to talk about the downside of Obamacare. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that you used to be able to make an appointment with your doctor and get in within like 2 or 3 days. Now it's a month, if you're lucky.
Yep, exactly.
Everything is overwhelmed, and everybody, the taxes, they like to talk about how they lowered taxes a little bit here, and no one over $400,000 is going to get taxed there. What do you call the rising bills at the grocery store, if not an ipso facto tax, because of the policies they've inflicted on the nation?
Yep,
they lie to you with such abandon, and with such ease that it's chocolatey covered goodness is just sickeningly sweet. It's time for us to all grow up. It really is. If you're still voting D just because you always did, you must take a look at why you continue to do that. What have they done for you? They've done nothing but lessen you, lessen the value of your dollar, lessen the cohesiveness of your community, and lessen the stature of the United States around the world, because We're guilty for every ill that's ever happened in the Milky Way.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Who helped cause soaring gas prices? BlackRock. Who contributed to outrageous housing prices? BlackRock. BlackRock and Larry Fink spent years harassing oil and gas companies, making them divest from fossil fuels. Now you feel the pain. And BlackRock-owned companies are snatching up houses, crippling families. Now BlackRock's former ESG czar, Brian Deese, is Biden's economic advisor, crushing America from within. That's what BlackRock is really about.
Our First Amendment right to free speech is under attack by woke activists and politicians. Wokeism seeks to suppress opinions and ideas that are deemed offensive, insensitive, or problematic, thereby stifling the free exchange of ideas and the pursuit of truth. It emphasizes social justice, identity politics, political correctness, and the regulation of language, and relies on euphemisms and ambiguous language to create the illusion of consensus, thus avoiding confrontation with opposing viewpoints. Wokeism is antithetical to free speech because it stifles the free exchange of ideas and the pursuit of truth. This is in direct opposition to the principles of free speech. Wokeism is an ideological cancer shopped by those who want to control you. This November, we have an opportunity to render wokeness to the ash heap of history. Vote smart. Vote against wokeness and those who would use it to control you.
And, we have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke.
If you like the podcast, please head on over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for our Substack. It comes straight into the app or straight into your email box, sending you each new article and each new podcast, circumventing the censors and the fact checkers. We have to be done with those jagoffs. And please remember the people who lost everything during the current storms, especially the people in western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee and northern Georgia. Just because the mainstream media has moved on from this story doesn't mean they still don't need our help. And be sure to remember to talk politics, religion, and current events with your family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. You don't have to be disrespectful, just discuss the matters of the day. When we do, we find out we all have more in common and we agree on more things than we disagree. When that happens, the globalists of the deep state who want to rule our lives, they lose their power. And that's exactly what we want. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no political correctness, and no wokeism. My name is Frank Salvato.